Shields up, Armbreakers. Rurikhan here coming at you with another video, and today we're going to be taking a look at Darksiders Genesis for the PC. This title was sent to me by THQ Nordic so that I could give it a look and tell you guys my opinions on it. Now, I've played the original Darksiders all the way through. I've played Darksiders 2, and those were two games that I've greatly enjoyed. But for whatever reason, I never got into Darksiders 3. Now, I do know that a couple of months ago, it ended up popping up on PlayStation Plus, so I did get it then, and I downloaded it, and eventually I do plan on giving it a look, but up until this point, I've just been a little bit too busy to dedicate any time to that. Now, when I initially saw the reveal of Darksiders Genesis, I was very curious because, it had an isometric perspective to it, and a lot of people immediately started saying, oh, it's like Darksiders but Diablo, which doesn't really make a lot of sense to me personally, because the only thing it really does is it uses the isometric perspective camera, which is not necessarily something that Diablo even pioneered. Other games have used perspective cameras before Diablo, and plenty of games will use perspective camera after Diablo, so this is not a Diablo Darksiders Genesis at all. It just uses that specific camera perspective. Darksiders Genesis is an action-adventure game. So when you're thinking about what type of game you can compare this to, a couple of things that come to mind would be something like Zelda with a lot of Metroidvania elements into it, which Zelda already kind of has Metroidvania elements, but, that's the kind of game that you can expect when you're talking about Darksiders, because that's what you got with the traditional third-person Darksiders games as well, like Darksiders 1 and Darksiders 2. They're very much action-adventure with Metroidvania weaved in between. Now, Darksiders 2 also had a weird loot system that not a lot of people really enjoyed. It basically had a loot system that is actually somewhat similar to Diablo, because your different weapons would have like rarities and affixes attached to them. So it kind of had a bit of a more RPG aspect to it. And this one actually doesn't have that. At least from the 5 hours that I've played so far, I haven't seen any kind of indication that the game would eventually have anything even remotely RPG related. I mean, you got some stuff that you upgrade your character with, but that's like commonplace nowadays in action-adventure games. Now, usually when I talk about these games, I like to start with the visuals. And visually, I think that Darksiders Genesis just looks great. Other than the isometric perspective, it looks just like what I expected a Darksiders game to look like. The art style is something that I really, really like in the Darksiders games. And the animations are also super, super solid. As a matter of fact, a lot of the times I almost wish that the cameras would zoom into the middle of the action so that I could watch some of the execution animations, which we'll talk about further on, because those are particularly satisfying to me, especially whenever War kills like one of the smaller types of enemies. And he just kind of like impales them with his greatsword, and then they're just kind of like stuck there. So he pulls them up and then he just like tosses them aside with the sword. That just feels particularly satisfying to me for some reason. Especially sometimes like they'll hit a wall or something and then they'll bounce off the wall. So like they just ragdoll all over the screen. I know that not everybody's into the whole ragdoll thing, but whenever one of those kind of like glitches out a little bit and he just like ragdolls across the screen, I love watching that stuff. I find it brutally satisfying. So visually, I got absolutely no complaints about Darksiders Genesis. When it comes to sound, the sound effects are pretty good in my opinion. Nothing really stood out there in terms of like particularly negative. Everything sounded good. The hits, the shots, everything sounds fine. The voice acting is fine. Some of the writing can be a little bit hit or miss. Like, I do like some of the jokes that Strife does about War and how that kind of, plays into the dialogue and the banter that these two characters have. But sometimes things just don't make a lot of sense. Like, for instance, there was this one sentence that stuck with me, which was Strife tells War, like, hey, man, you got to learn how to use your head more. And War just goes, I'll use my head as a battering ram. And I'm just like, okay, nobody says that, okay? Even the most violent person doesn't just go like, oh, I'll just use my head as a battering ram. It kind of diminishes the character of War a little bit. And I kind of felt like, there's more to that particular character than like, oh, I'm going to go and I'm going to kill everybody. And that's kind of what they made War feel like. It's just like he's this little tin soldier that just goes around doing whatever the council tells him. And I guess this could be due to the fact that Darksiders Genesis is a prequel. And, I'm more used to the War after Darksiders 1. But at the same time, I just don't think that anyone is really that naive as some of the things that we see Ward talk about in this particular game. I just feel like he got a little bit diminished as a character. Strife, on the other hand, is a fantastic character, and I really like all of his takes whenever he speaks. I really do like Strife in this game. I think he's a lot of fun, but I got a little bit sidetracked here because I was talking about voice acting. But yeah, the voice acting is fine, and the soundtrack is also pretty good. So, sound is good, visuals are good, it's all good. Now, in terms of story, as the name indicates, Darksiders Genesis is very much a prequel to the original Darksiders, and up until this point, I've played until about Chapter 5. I think I was midway through the Chapter 5, and so far the story hasn't really pulled me in. Initially, when you start the game, the Council sends War and Strife out to hunt Lucifer because he's doing something shady with other demons in Hell. And essentially what happens is you find Volgrim and you just end up running errands for him. And to me, it didn't make a whole lot of sense from a story perspective. From a gameplay perspective, everything feels fine, but it's just like, oh, we found Volgrim. And now Volgrim is telling me, oh, I'll help you guys out, but you got to go fetch this thing for me. And then you go fetch something for him, and then you come back. And then Volgrim is like, okay, this was great. Now I need you to go fetch something else. And you're like, how's this going to help us? He's like, it's totally going to help you. Trust me. And you're like, okay, let's go get this other thing. And then you get the other thing, and you come back to Volgrim, and he's like, okay, now I need you guys to go get this other thing. And your characters are like, come on, really? And he's like, yes, it's totally going to help us out. And off they go again. And I'm just like, dude. I mean, that got really old really fast. Maybe it picks up later on, but that is why this is not a review. This is my impressions on what I've experienced so far. Now, at the end of the day, this is a game designed with co-op in mind. In case you guys weren't aware, Darksiders Genesis does allow you to play co-op with a friend. So therefore, I guess that's why they don't want to make the story too convoluted or something like that. They want to keep things simple. It's just like, here's a task you guys can go and do. Because you know what it's like when you're playing co-op with a friend. The last thing that you want to be doing is reading tons and tons and tons and tons of text or trying to understand a really convoluted storyline. So I understand in a way why the story is being kept simple like this. But in another way, I would have liked, at least some reasoning why we're not chopping off Volgrim's head, despite the fact that he sent us on a wild goose chase 3 times in a row. The first time just happens to be for him to get, his succubus slave or something. What the hell's going on? Anyway, in terms of gameplay, I really like the combat. In this particular game, you will be playing as both War and Strife. So if you're playing co-op, one of you can play as Strife, the other can play as War. If you're playing as a single player, you can swap between the 2 characters whenever you want. And as you progress through your characters and you level up certain abilities, you'll eventually even be able to have special abilities whenever you swap. So you'll swap from Strife to War and he comes in and does a massive AoE attack. Or you swap from War to Strife and he comes in and he just shoots up the place. And overall, I found the combat to just be really, really good. Now, Strife, you're going to have guns, and that is going to allow you to do a wide assortment of range attacks. You have different bullets that you can fire, and you have a bunch of skills that allow you to kite. I particularly like the caltrops, which is a skill that I usually don't tend to use in most games that have caltrops, but in this one it's really good because you put them on the ground, and then enemies have to run to you, and they have a little bit of a knockback effect, so you can just keep on blasting from afar while the caltrops are there. He's also got a mechanic which is called a hot streak, which basically whenever you get a bunch of shots in a row, you start shooting super fast and, you just deal tons and tons of damage. And he just feels great to play. He also has a couple of melee hits, but the focus of Strife is actually in his ranged combat. Now, when it comes to War, as you guys probably expect, he's all about the big, meaty melee hits, and his skills essentially emphasize that. He's very much a bruiser. He comes in, he just smashes everything around with melee, and, that's probably what you'll be seeing in the gameplay whenever I swap around to War. Most of the gameplay, I'll probably be showing Strife because he is the new character. This is the first time that you get to play as Strife. Darksiders 1 focuses around you playing as War. Darksiders 2 focuses around you playing as Death, which, as far as I can tell, is not present in this game. And Darksiders 3 focuses on playing as Fury. So up until the point that I've played of the story, they just say that Death and Fury are off doing something else. I'm not sure if maybe they're planning on doing some DLC to add Death and Fury at a later date. But, it would be cool to have, all of the 4 horsemen in the same game. But, maybe that happens, maybe it won't, we shall see. both of the horsemen also will have dodge rolls. I mean, they're not really dodge rolls as much as they're dodge dashes. They do have invincibility frames, so they do allow you to dash around quite a bit. Strife in particular, there's like an upgrade. I don't remember if War has one as well, because again, I've been focusing mostly on Strife's skills, but Strife has an upgrade that allows him to just like dodge 3 times in a row, which makes him a really, really mobile character, coupled together with his guns. I think that he's overall a little bit more powerful than War, because you can kite more efficiently. But anyways, after you deal a certain amount of damage to most enemies, they will all have like a certain threshold, at which point you can just press the circle button on your DualShock 4 or the B button on your the Xbox One controller if you're using one of those, or I don't know which button it is on the keyboard. They do advise people to use a controller for this game because it plays very much like a twin-stick shooter type of game. You do have several abilities that are ranged. Even with War, you get like this glaive that you can throw around. So yeah, a controller does appear to be the optimal way of doing it, but you know, if people have been playing it on PC with mouse and keyboard, let me know what your experience is like. I usually tend to play these with controllers anyway, so it is what it is. In terms of boss fights, these are going to feature some more mechanically driven battles, but nothing too over the top. Some of the bosses might have some really good ranged attacks, while others maybe will throw minions at you. But at this point, I don't really think I fought any major bosses because I'm still kind of working my way up the food chain. So while I've had boss fights, definitely, where you can see the boss's gauge at the end of the screen and all that, I kind of feel like none of them have really been major demons. They're all just like whatever dudes that show up and I kill them and it's not even like a big deal. Now, in good Darksiders fashion, there is going to be a lot of secrets that you will find throughout the levels if you take the time to explore. Some of those will be tied with abilities that you will get later into the game, which means that backtracking is going to be a thing, which is also very much typical to the Darksiders franchise. Now, this particular Darksiders, the structure that it has is in between levels. You go to this place, which is the Void, which is where Volgrim is, and the Void itself starts unlocking like different sections which can lead you to upgrades and other resources that you can get. And I actually found that Void part of it to be kind of a bit of a downer in a way, because like, you know, they just tell you, hey, there's new Void paths that opened, but it doesn't save the paths that you've done before, so they expect you to just remember all the paths that you've done. And you're talking about like rocks show up from the floor when you're navigating this area, so it can get really confusing if you just like, oh, I've explored this side of it, but like a small little new path opens up on that side, and you're expected to just go explore the whole side again. And, you know, that kind of felt a little bit annoying. I wish they would just like, you know, if I've revealed a certain portion of the map, just show me that I've revealed that so that I know that I should be exploring somewhere else, as opposed to constantly going back, exploring the entirety of the Void every single time I go there, because it gets boring pretty fast. But yeah, there are plenty of secrets to discover, both in the Void as well as the levels. But as I was saying, in between levels, you go to the Void. In the Void, you can buy upgrades and do all that kind of stuff. And basically from the Void, you can queue up to do any level that you want. And the game does feature like a linear structure of levels. So whenever you go back to a level that you've previously been to, the events that take place in the level, like from a story perspective, they're still happening. So you're literally just like replaying the level, but you get more rewards so that you can grind up like abilities and stuff like that, and you get more resources so that you can, you know, unlock more things for your characters. Now, there's a lot of abilities to unlock, as well as a couple of passive upgrades that you can apply to your horsemen as you progress through the title. The creature core tree is actually something that I found interesting because you'll be trying to slot cores in that tree in the most efficient way possible. So for instance, you might collect certain creature cores and they will be like an attack type. Another one might be a wrath type. Another one might be, I forget what the other type was, but there was like 3 or 4 different types. And then different slots in your tree will have a type associated with them. So you'll be trying to match these types into a tree to then get access to bigger nodes of that tree, which will slot greater creature things in there. Basically, it's almost like a little mini puzzle game where you're trying to figure out the most optimal way to place your skills. I found that to be somewhat satisfying because I'm just someone that likes tinkering with that kind of stuff and doing builds and stuff like that, so that was kind of cool. But ultimately, it is something that is a little bit linear. You're just going to be like, okay, I want to get to these bigger nodes. Let me see if I have enough of these creature cards to get to these nodes. And if I don't, then what's the best possible way that I can combine these things to get as much skills as possible? Now, a lot of these upgrades are passive, so they'll just be like, oh, this increases your damage, this increases your health, this increases, how much range damage do, or how much damage you can resist, and stuff like that. Some of them do come with procs, like, for instance, one of the procs that you will probably see a bunch of times throughout this video is that sometimes when I dodge, I leave like a trail of lava behind me. That's one of the procs from one of these skills. There's another one that has like a 2% chance whenever I attack something to summon like a hellhound to help me out. So, these are some of the effects that you can get. In the large areas, you'll also be able to summon horses to get around, but they also have these specific arenas where they'll want you to fight, and they'll have like a big circle that kind of like forces you to dismount before you get into those areas. So you can't ride your horse everywhere, particularly whenever you're inside a dungeon or something. You can't ride your horse there. But if you're outside in like a significantly large area, they'll let you just summon your horse at will to navigate that area and explore it a little bit better. I didn't find the horses to be too important. As a matter of fact, I know they're called the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, right? But mechanically in this game, I almost feel like you could just have the horses be automatic. Like whenever I'm running for a certain period of time, just have the horse automatically appear. And it would actually be easier than me like constantly summoning the horse. I actually didn't like the horse all that much, particularly because I felt like it hampered my movement as opposed to playing with it. Like, I seem to remember that in Darksiders 2, you getting on your horse was something very seamless. Like, the horse would just appear, and you're riding the horse, and you can get off the horse, you can jump off the horse. Whenever you get off the horse in this game, your character is like stiff. You're getting off the horse, and you're standing still. And it's like, I want to be able to get off the horse in a jump. I want to be able to get off the horse in an attack pattern. But no, it's like, it's a very deliberate action that you have to take. It's like, oh, I'm getting off of my horse. Here we go. And it kind of it almost made me want to not really ride the horse unless I was really going through, a long stretch. And I was just like, okay, I'll get there faster if I use the horse. So that was something I was a little bit disappointed in, particularly when it was so well implemented in Darksiders 2, but at the end of the day, this is a different team. Now, overall, I was very pleased with the gameplay. I enjoyed playing the game, even though I know I'm nitpicking a couple of things here and there, but I enjoyed the combat. The combat is fun, the animations are good, the visuals are good, and it was just nice to play a Darksiders title again. I really should get into Darksiders 3 at some point. I don't know why I haven't done it yet, but we'll get there at some point, I promise you guys. But yeah, overall I liked the gameplay. The swapping between the 2 horsemen, sometimes it took a little bit getting used to, but after you get used to it, and particularly after you get the skills that allow you to swap in between them into a special ability, then it just like becomes kind of like a part of your combo. Like, I'll do these things, then I'll swap into war, and then I'll do those things, and I'll swap back into strife and do something different. So it started becoming a little bit more natural. Now, a couple of things that I noticed that were not so nice was the fact that I got stuck in geometry quite often. And this doesn't actually happen to me in video games all that often, so it's all the more noticeable when it happens, and particularly when it happens multiple times. Like, I didn't get stuck like once or twice. We're talking about I played for like 5 hours, and I probably got stuck in geometry more than 10 times. That's a lot, okay? That is a lot of times to get stuck in geometry. And 3 of those times it happened during a boss fight, which is really bad. One of the times the boss pushed me into this area that, I don't know if it's glitched out or whatever, but basically I was stuck there and I couldn't move. I was trying to dodge, I was trying to jump, I was trying to do everything, and I couldn't move. And then after he killed that character, because whenever one of the characters dies, the other character that is still alive spawns in. If he kills both characters, I guess that's like a game over state and you have to restart from a checkpoint. That hasn't really happened to me. But after he killed my character and my other character spawned, I was dodging through the map, and eventually I dodged into that specific spot again, and I got stuck there again. And then eventually it ended up happening again because this was a big boss, and there wasn't that much room to dodge. So every now and then I dodged in that general direction, and boom, I got stuck. So that was something that happened to me much more often than I expected. Another weird glitch that I had was a camera glitch, where the camera was just not centered around my character anymore. And someone, because I was streaming this, someone on my stream said, oh, that happened to me as well. You have to like remount the horse and it'll get fixed. I would remount the horse, it would still bug, but if I eventually swapped characters and that fixed it. And then there were just a couple of situations in the game where the AI just stopped responding to my presence. So I was able to like kill a couple of monsters, and they almost seemed like they weren't even aware that I was there. And now, in isolation, like if these were things that, one of them happened every now and then, I probably wouldn't even mention it because I don't think it would have been such a big deal. But the fact that I was stuck in geometry so often and then I still had all of these other problems, to me it paints a bit of a darker picture. Like maybe the game needed a little bit more Q&A time. Either that or maybe I was just brutally unlucky. Like if nobody else is experiencing this, then maybe it's just me, but it happened way too often. Now, this game is currently only available on Stadia and PC, and the console versions are coming later down the line, I believe in February or something. And this almost made me wonder if maybe Google was involved here in securing some kind of like timed exclusivity deal for Stadia because it's only available in Stadia and PC. And that might have been a bit of a mistake for them to release it this soon because I do think this could have been used a little bit more time in the oven. See, on a personal note, this game to me just screams Nintendo Switch. Because like you have the two-player co-op functionality, you have the two Joy-Cons, you have visuals that shouldn't really have that much of a problem playing on Switch and still have a really good art style that would probably just make it look great on Switch. So to me, like I would have much rather get this game on Switch. But if you're someone that just plays PC and you are a Darksiders fan, I still think you're going to enjoy it. Just be aware that there are a couple of hitches here and there, but I do believe that this can all be sorted out in later patches. But again, at the end of the day, it all depends on whether or not you are okay with that kind of stuff, because you can also just wait for like a discount or something, and at that point the game might already be patched, and you won't really have to deal with any of that stuff. I looked up a couple of articles online to see what is the completion time that people are looking at, and Game Rant is reporting about 10 hours if you're beelining the campaign. But, there's plenty of side stuff, there's plenty of backtracking to do. So if you're someone that enjoys like actually completing stuff and picking up more upgrades for your characters and stuff, I suspect you're looking more in the realms of like 15 hours to finish the game for the first time. And after you finish it for the first time, there's an additional difficulty, so you can still play through it. I think the difficulty is like apocalyptic mode or whatever. So you can still play through it in a more challenging setting, and, that'll give you a couple of more hours. But if you're just beelining it and you just want to see what the story is because you're a Darksiders fan and you care about the story of Darksiders Genesis, then maybe wait for a discount. Me personally, it's like if you are someone that has a Switch, I'd probably try to get this on Switch because I think that would be the platform where this would be best, but that's just one man's opinion. Let me know what you guys think about it in the comment section down below. Thank you all very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like button. If you did not enjoy it, hit the dislike button and let me know what was wrong with it. Thank you very much for watching. Stay strong and may your shields never break.